Hey everybody. Hello. Hi. Hey there. Hey everybody. It's September already. Hopefully it doesn't get too dark before I finish this video, because this is the natural lighting situation. So for those of you who do not know, I am a resident of New Orleans since August of 2020, and my son and I left New Orleans Friday at around noon because my gut, my oracles, my ancestors, my survival instinct was like, you should go. And so we got on the road at about 12:45 Central Time on Friday last week. And probably by the time we were about an hour or two out, the hurricane Ida had been classified as a hurricane. And within the next like 12 hours, it was becoming clear, hey Reedy, that things were gonna be rough. So we drove to Atlanta, where we stayed until Wednesday of this week. And then Wednesday of this week, we drove up to Chicago to my parents' house where I lived before I left Chicago, in my old bedroom, going live here. But we are safe. I had someone check on my house. A few people checked and everything is okay. Just that New Orleans is not quite inhabitable right now. Power is still out in my home in New Orleans. Most places in New Orleans do not have power. And so we're here sitting tight and safe, you know, until we can go back. And I don't know, I'm still kind of cautious and up in the air about going back to, I feel like Spirit wants me to do something else. I don't know what Spirit wants me to do, so I'm just kind of waiting. So yeah. Meantime, it's August. It's not August. It's September 2021, and I hope you have your 2021 Sidereal Astrology Guide. We will be going through the summary for September 2021. We will be going through the questions, the fill in the blanks. Yeah, so we're going to start here. This is the themes for each month in 2021. If you did not see the August 2021 horoscope, you can go on my Instagram, I believe. You can go on my YouTube. It's there. YouTube, probably. Instagram, they're acting really funny with videos lately. Which is wild, because they're like, we're going to be focused on a video platform. It's like, okay, you need to learn how to work the videos that y'all got. Yeah, so the theme for August 2021 was constructing identities. And we talked a lot about whose vision determines what you see. When you look at other people, when you look at the world, when you look at yourself in the mirror, whose eyes, whose gaze, whose perception and judgment have you internalized in order to make sense of what you're seeing. And I want to read some tweets that I put off yesterday, because these tweets are very relevant to August and September of 2021. And I feel like what I said in these tweets is really the perfect bridge connecting. Now, y'all know that when we're talking about months, we are talking about the Gregorian calendar. And the Gregorian calendar is a convoluted time-keeping mechanism that goes all the way back to the Roman Empire. So when we talk about August, you know, we're talking about Aug meaning 8, Sept meaning 9, right? Oct meaning, no, that's not right. Sept, wait a minute. Right? Somebody stuck August in there, right? You see what I'm saying here? Like there's a logic there, right? You get September, which is 7, October, which is 8, November, NOV is 9, December, decimal, right? 10. But the months just stopped making sense because people came in and was like, I need a month named after me, Augustus. And it's just like, but that's not how we were counting, right? So understand when we're talking about month, when we're talking about the Gregorian calendar, this is not connected to any meaningful phenomenon other than imperialism and colonialism, right? It is a consensus, a kind of agreed upon, even though we didn't choose it or vote on it, way of keeping time. But when it comes to astrology, the Gregorian calendar has nothing to do with astrology. The only part I would say of the Gregorian calendar that's relevant or has any connection to astrology is the concept of a month itself, and month coming from moon. And so the concept of there being a way to segment time in 28, 30, or 31 day periods is analogous to the lunar cycle, which is about 29 point something days, right? So the concept of a month is connected to the lunar cycle, but we have come so far from that. Our timekeeping mechanisms are completely divorced from any real phenomenon that we experience or witness in the world or in our bodies. And so this is why this is so helpful, because it really helps you learn how to keep time in a way that's connected to like what you're actually experiencing. Which brings me to these tweets. The reason why I said all of that is because the line of demarcation between August and September is really artificial and meaningless. It's very rare that what's going on in the sky aligns with the Gregorian calendar or a month switch. So the tweets that I put off yesterday that I mentioned I would talk about today are a great way to understand that what time in terms of planetary cycles that we were in August did not end because we have moved to September. So these are the tweets. I said, lack of self-awareness is a privilege of whiteness, maleness, and wealth. I define self-awareness as the ability to recognize and acknowledge when one experiences an aspect of themselves that they have previously denied or were unaware of. When you are white or male or wealthy, the consequences for lack of self-awareness are low stakes or non-existent. But when you are not white, not male, not wealthy, lack of self-awareness is expensive. It will cost you your life. Self-awareness is the survival-based necessity of knowing how other people see you, especially those who have power over you. It's the necessity to internalize the gaze of others so that you are always aware of how others see you and judge you. Because if you don't, right? So when we're talking about a planet in the birth chart that is associated with awareness and self-awareness, we are talking about the sun. And I said here, the sun in your sidereal birth chart shows the role of self-awareness in your experiences and how or if it is valuable to your survival and well-being to come into awareness of yourself, right? So one of the premises of your sidereal birth chart is that there are these fundamental core archetypal aspects of self that all exist inside each and every one of us. And it is through our sidereal birth chart that we can kind of establish a language or a hierarchy of priorities that helps us understand which of these archetypes or fundamental essential aspects of humanity and human experience are relevant to us. So for example, someone with a lot of Scorpio and a lot of Aries, right? This is a person whose life experiences have been a lot about alienation, abandonment, isolation, but also this is the person who's at the front line of initiating and embodying the kinds of changes that evolve humanity, right? If you're blending in and you're not too different, you don't stand out, right? There is no impetus for you to change. There is no impetus for you to push forward. There's no resistance, right? And so when we're talking about self-awareness and we're talking about the planet, the sun, we're talking about, has it been useful or necessary for you to develop self-awareness in order to survive? Who needs to develop self-awareness? And it's not a conscious thing that we do. None of these survival-based things are conscious, right? But who needs to develop self-awareness? The people who need to develop an awareness of themselves, meaning how they are perceived and judged by others, are the people that are so different that they cannot hide, right? And so it becomes this way that we know when our differences are a threat and when it is safe to be different, right? Where we need to hide not just ourselves, but our whole body and everything. Like, I'm just gonna go in my room and close the door, hide in the corner, right? Because being perceived is unsafe for me. Being perceived is unsafe for me because I have very well internalized the judgment and perception that other people have had of me. And this is why I get angry, very indignant, and just outright confused at this whole thing of don't care what other people think of you. That is a privilege of whiteness, maleness, and wealth. It is a privilege to not care what other people think of you. Because if you don't care what other people think of you, that means that people are not thinking of you. They have not judged you. They don't have a perception or opinion of you. And the reason they don't have a perception or opinion of you is because when they look at you, they see themselves. I have no reason to judge anybody who mirrors back to me the self that I see when I look in the mirror. But if I were a white male looking at a black person, I don't see myself in that person. Or if I am a black woman occupying a space full of non-black people, I better get real clear on what these people think of me, because my survival is rooted in my capacity to actually accurately judge the perceptions of other people, right? So when we talk about don't care what other people think, do you, be you. And I'm just like, wow, that is such a white thing to say, right? What reason does a white male have to consider his actions or the consequences of his choices before he takes an action? Why? Because everyone will perpetually perceive him as a little boy who could do nothing wrong. But if my 9-year-old, right, suddenly he's a man at 9, same action taken as a 50-year-old man, right? So this burden of self-awareness, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because it is the awareness of self that allows us to evolve. It allows us to become more authentic, right? When you have no self-awareness, you cannot even identify your own differences. You cannot identify the source of your suffering because you look around, you look in the mirror, and you're like, well, I'm just like all of these people. And it's like, you're not. So it is the non-white, the indigenous, the black, those who have embraced their differences, the queer, the trans, the non-binary, right? Who have embraced their differences that teach all of us how to be human. How can you be human if you're just an animal in the pack, right? There's a differentiation process, right? And this is not about courage. This is not about resilience. This isn't cool. It's painful and it's survival. But at the same time, the joy that Black people, that Indigenous people, that queer people have access to is envied the world over, because our differences have been made glaringly obvious to us in violent ways, but also they have been the source of our celebration and the source of our joy, to the point that like everybody's trying to copy us. Trans folk been setting the trend of language, of fashion, of music and art for centuries, whether or not they were out or we knew they were queer. Your tarot deck was painted by a queer Black person, Pamela Coleman Smith, right? The deck that's all trendy and right. So we've been establishing this because there is a liberation that comes with embracing your differences, right? So this is constructing identities, and this is a lot about being at the midpoint between eclipses, right? So we had eclipses in May and June of 2021. We'll have eclipses again in November and December of 2021. And the midpoint between those eclipses is right now, which is Leo. So we had the Taurus side in the spring. We'll have the Scorpio side this winter. But right now we're in Leo, right? So when we switch over to September, the theme here is back to life, back to reality. Now that's a song. Back to life, back to reality, right? And I named September this theme because since April 4th of 2021, Jupiter has been in Aquarius. And generally, this has been quite a magical transit because it has given those of us who have natal Saturn in Sidereal Aquarius, that is people who were born between 93 and 95, I believe. 93 and 95, you should have Saturn in Sidereal Aquarius. So this is giving you a preview of your Saturn return, right? The self-determination, you know, so many of you who have Saturn in Sidereal Aquarius are my clients. You are people who follow me on social media. You're here. And I have learned so much from you all. And the primary thing that I've learned from you is that you have done the heavy lifting to evolve society. You have done the heavy lifting that looks like breaking us out of the prisons of the status quo. Not by rebelling. This isn't rebellion. This is not being eccentric, right? Because to say that Aquarius or Saturn in Aquarius is eccentric is to somehow say that all of the identities that we did not have language for, that were not seen before, it's like saying they didn't exist. And it's like, no, they've always existed. Transness, non-binariness, queerness has existed as long as humans have existed. And so this isn't rebellious. This isn't creating anything new at all. It is the cost of erasing yourself inside the false binaries of gender, inside the false binary of race, i.e. white, black, or white and everyone else, right? The cost of erasing yourself is not worth the pain, right? So you all have gotten a prelude of your Saturn return, and you'll see the issues that we're dealing with. I spoke, I think this was on Twitter, I did a thread and I was kind of comparing the Saturn Aquarius generation with the Saturn and Pisces generation, and how like there's a convergence of these two generations in 2022, these two signs. And I was talking about how Aquarius is a direct confrontation with patriarchy. Patriarchy is, I say who you are, I tell you who you are, this is your name, this is your gender, this is your sexual identity, this is the job, right? I have the authority, I have the power as male, and so I'm going to tell you who you are, I'm going to tell you what you are, and if you think you're going to be anything other than that, I will smite you with my mighty fist, right? And Aquarius is just like, first of all, I'm invisible, so you can't see me to tell me who I am in the first place. Second of all, there is this place inside of me that you cannot see, that you cannot perceive, that you cannot control, that you do not have access to. And that, Mr. Patriarchy, is called my imagination. And in my imagination, I am free to conceive of a self that you cannot control, you cannot name. And as a matter of fact, let me give you some new words to help you see just how much you don't know what you're talking about, right? So we have Gen Xers who have Saturn and Aquarius, right? These were people who were born in the early mid-60s. And we have Generation Z, born in the mid 90s, early mid 90s, right? Who are giving us this language, who are giving us this path to liberation. Let me name all of the ways patriarchy has got us fucked up, right? We're talking about air signs. It's always about language. It's always about the symbols that we can use and imagine to articulate. And one of the main tools that Aquarius uses is reclaiming language, right? Reclaiming queer, reclaiming slut and bitch, and the N-word, which I won't say so nobody will flag me on here, right? It's funny, I can say all of that, but I can't say, right? Crazy. Anyways, you get my point, right? Reclaiming language, repurposing it, reimagining ourselves, right? So again, August, we had the full moon in Aquarius. We had many oppositions, Sun opposite Jupiter in Aquarius, Mercury opposite Jupiter in Aquarius, all of these things, right? In direct confrontation with patriarchy. And I would say one of the culminations collectively of this direct confrontation with patriarchy, there's two. First is the way that those in positions of authority and power have abandoned their duty to protect and use their authority to do things like outlaw masks or to refuse to acknowledge that we're in the deadliest wave of the pandemic thus far. And deadly not because more people are dying right now, but more people will die. And we just delayed the death. People who've gotten seriously ill, their lives have been shortened by years, if not decades. And so we are coddled into thinking that somehow this virus is less deadly now because the morgues are not full and the death rate is not what it was, but the quality of life and the lifespan of those who have gotten, right? I mean, this boils down to personhood, which is the main theme of Aquarius, right? What makes a person a person? And what are the rights and privileges granted to those who are deemed person? Well, I'll tell you one thing that is not granted to people who are stripped of personhood, and that is the right to control what goes on inside their uterus, right? So here's another thing. I mean, remember, guys, when we did the August 2021, I said the last Mercury retrograde of the year. This is from the August summary, y'all. The last Mercury retrograde of the year informally begins with the first of 3 conjunctions between Mercury and Mars. That was on the 18th of August in Leo. This first conjunction in Leo speaks to the ways power concedes to authority. Supreme Court has power. They have conceded to authority so that power might preserve itself. We face this dynamic through confrontations with patriarchy and whiteness's obsession with dominance over others. I feel like I read that spot on. Let's go to September. Back to life, back to reality. Jupiter is coming back to Capricorn, and it's 2 signs that sneak up on Leo and be like, gotcha. Okay? And those 2 signs are Pisces. See you in 2022, Pisces. I got you. Okay? And Capricorn. And today we're here to talk about how Capricorn can grab Leo by the throat, choke it a little bit, and let him know what's what. Why does Capricorn have the gotcha on Leo? Because Leo, ruled by the sun, so going back to our conversation about self-awareness, right? Leo is just the human propensity to believe that only what I can see is real and exists. If I cannot see it, then it does not exist. Now, this is important. The contents of our subconscious are scary to confront, right? Scary to confront. And this is why so many of us avoid intimacy or close relationships, or we end them or feel like we don't have the capacity to be in intimate, close relationship, because the thing that we're often encountering, barring violence, because that's common too, but the thing that we're often encountering is our own self and the self we become in the relationship, right? So Leo's blind spot is its own. It's like the emperor has no clothes, cannot truly get a full image of the self if it relies only on its eyes and conscious mind. How can you see yourself without a mirror? Leo don't want no mirror to show them their real self. And this is important. This is not a personality failing. This is a developmental phase. It is an aspect of being human, of being consciousness, that there is a part of ourselves that has to only focus on what we're aware of. Imagine if the contents of your subconscious were constantly spilling out. The memories of trauma were constantly disrupting you. The thing you thought you forgot that you can't forget that keeps coming back, right? If it was just constantly bubbling up like nasty sewage coming up out of the toilet, we couldn't function. And the people who that does happen to, we institutionalize. We call them schizophrenic or bipolar or borderline personality disorder, right? Because it's impossible to function in relationship, in society, if the subconscious contents of your psyche are constantly spilling out and overshadowing your capacity to see what's right in front of you. So what Capricorn does to Leo is says, I know this is what you can see and what you are consciously aware of in the world and in yourself, but there is a whole reality that exists independent of your consciousness, independent of your capacity or desire to see. And the ultimate reality that we're always talking about with Capricorn by way of Saturn is our mortality. So understand that so much of what undergirds the way that authority is operating right now is a refusal to acknowledge their individual mortality, the mortality of humans as a collective, and the mortality of America as a colonial occupying force on the land that we are on now. The refusal to acknowledge mortality will have you walking off a bridge thinking that you are Jesus and you can walk on air. And honey, let me tell you, that is not it. And the truth is, those who are able to survive in seemingly supernatural ways are often those who have the benefit of whiteness and the benefit of wealth to protect them from their own foolishness. So of course they think they're immortal because the entire society has coddled them and convinced them that they are immortal, that nothing can harm them. Every step of the way, whatever ill-fated step they took has been protected from whiteness. The criminal justice system has protected them. Male-centered medicine, white-centered medicine, clinical trials that include no indigenous people, that include no so-called Asian people, that include no black people. All of the science and the entire medical industry is catered to white males. So of course you feel like you're immortal. Every single life-saving technology that we've developed over the past 100 years has centered your specific lack of melanin, subcutaneous levels of fat under your skin, right? Everything has catered to you. So of course they feel immortal. But when Saturn comes, when Jupiter comes back to Capricorn, taking us all the way back, right? Jupiter was in Capricorn, let's see here, March 29th, 2020 through, when did Jupiter go back into Sagittarius? Hold on. That had to be June 20th, I believe, of 2020. And then Jupiter went back into Capricorn November of 2020, left Capricorn April of 2021, going back into Capricorn September 14th, and will stay there until November something 2021. So this is the confrontation with mortality, with reality. And let me tell you this, you can read ahead in the guide. I suggest you definitely read November, but understand this. When societies are constructed to coddle a certain class or group of people from recognizing their mortality and the consequences of their choices on their mortality, it is not that they become immortal, though it may seem that way. But what really happens is that the burden of harm and death is passed on to other people. They live, we die. September monthly summary. Jupiter comes back to finish its transit through Capricorn after spending the last 6 months in Aquarius. Jupiter's sign changes each year. So Jupiter changes sign once a year, meaning that essentially Jupiter spends total 1 year or 11 months and some change in each sign, okay? Jupiter's sign changes each year shift the context we reference in order to understand ourselves, our experiences, and what is happening in the world around us. It even alters the way we interpret past events. So understand, for me, I'm not with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. I don't really care about Vesta and Chiron and all your other stuff. When I want to know what's going on in the world, I want to know what Jupiter and Saturn are doing. I want to know what phase of their relationship that they're in. So we are still in the great conjunction time phase of Jupiter and Saturn, okay? I want to know what the eclipses are doing. And if I pay attention to Jupiter and Saturn and I pay attention to the eclipses, I can tell you what's going on. And the thing that's really going on is there is nothing new under the sun whatsoever. We are constantly repeating cycles all the time. Yes, many times we'll be in a similar planetary configuration and it won't repeat identically. But I will tell you this, I told you that when we got to when we got to August of 2021, we would be transported back to 2016. And have we not, saints? We have, right? Additionally, we get to the 16th solar return of Hurricane Katrina, and Hurricane Ida comes, and the same infrastructure neglect that made Hurricane Katrina as devastating as it was is the same infrastructure neglect that has the power off in New Orleans still, has seen flooding, historic and catastrophic flooding in Philadelphia, in New Jersey, in New York, all along the eastern seaboard, right? This is the same thing because we have not changed. We have not learned our lessons. We would like to preserve power and the promise of dominance over someone else rather than acknowledging the reality that exists. So understand, while Jupiter has been in Aquarius, the context we have been using to interpret and make sense of ourselves and the world around us is that of self-determination. It is a momentary reprieve where we get to see ourselves free from the gaze of patriarchy in its most ideal form, but also where we get to say, right? I always say to Aquarius, I am not is not an identity. And we see many people who have been caught up in the I am not. No idea who they are, what they are, but they can tell you what they're not. And that, my friend, is not an identity. An identity is not a negation of someone else's commandeering of your identity. If you are only negating what someone else has told you you are, that's not an identity. That's rebellion. And rebellion has its place. But when it comes to constructing identities, what is the affirmative language you use to actually articulate who and what you are? So many of us right now are caught up in I am not and you can't make me, and only people who are this or who identify as this do these things, and since I am not that. But if you ask them what they are, they have no idea. I'm sorry, friends, white is not an identity. White is an eraser. What happens when you take an eraser to pencil on a piece of paper? What happens to the paper? It turns white. White is an eraser. White erases your language, erases your culture, your gods. It erases any memory of any identity you may have had prior to stepping foot in a place that required you to abandon all of that shit to survive. Okay? Let me keep reading. It is clear that Jupiter's Capricorn transit 2020 through 2021 connects directly to the same transit 2008 till 2009. What was 2008, 2009, friends? Come on now. That was the mortgage crisis. Where are we now? Housing crisis. Back then, we elected the first Black president of the United States. The vice president of that time has now been elected to govern during this time, and we have elected our first Black, first Indian, and first woman vice president. What do these time periods have in common? Besides the obvious contraction and efforts to re-expand the economic fate of the world, both time periods have sobered us. Have we learned anything from the last time around? What have you learned from the last time around? Finally, Mercury stations retrograde at the early degrees of Libra. I've been looking forward to this, y'all. Connecting us back to the Mercury retrograde, to the last Mercury retrograde of 2020. Then we established a consensus for how we will move forward in this new reality that Saturn and Capricorn has brought us. Transits through Libra will always remind us of 2017 and 2018's movements of justice for and by women. Each year, with each successive series of transits through Libra, we continue the work of creating a new consensus on the roles that women play in society. And by women, I mean any gender identity that has been policed, primarily those who have uteruses, but that includes trans women who may not have a uterus. It includes non-binary folks who may not have a uterus, but is clocked and treated and oppressed as if they were assigned woman, right? I think that we are right on time for some Libra transits, which begins on tomorrow with Venus moving into Libra. Why are we due for some Libra transits? Because Texas and the Supreme Court have colluded in deciding that people with uteruses have no agency over what happens inside that uterus. And so justice for and by women means that it's time to revisit the consensus. Okay? So, these Libra transits coming up, I mean, oh God, September is such a convergence of so many things right now. It is Jupiter going back into Capricorn. And one of the reasons why this is so important is because Jupiter in Aquarius has really been the defining feature of the summer in terms of being able to dissociate enough from the reality that we're dealing with to act like it's not happening, right? When we talk about the wounds and gifts, we're talking about air signs. The wound is always being disregarded, being ignored, being made invisible, right? For Aquarius, that's erasure. And erasure means whatever semblance of an identity you may think you have, patriarchy, capitalism, and racism comes and tells you who and what you are and forces you to conform lest they take your life, right? So air has been wonderful, I think, for so many people who have discovered the freedom and fluidity of gender. And I know that a lot of people struggle with language. They struggle with queer. They struggle with labels. And understand that you don't have to adopt any of those labels to experience freedom in the fluidity of gender embodiment. The fluidity of gender embodiment looks like deciding that you do not want to bear children if you have a uterus. That is a freedom that cost a whole lot for people 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, right? But you have that choice now. Still people talk crap, right? Finding freedom in the fluidity of gender looks like people without uteruses championing and embodying the liberatory practices of reproductive justice for those who do have uteruses, right? Finding liberation in the fluidity of gender has nothing to do with a label. And labels might be helpful, they can be useful, they can be liberating, but the fluidity of gender is simply finding the way and space that you authentically embody yourself regardless of regardless of your genitals, regardless of your assigned sexual or gender orientation, right? Finding liberation in the fluidity of gender means letting go of this Stepford Wives ideology of who you have to be in a relationship, right? Let's go to the fill in the blanks for September. All right, so that's wrong. Mars not in Virgo yet. That says the second. Yes, Saru. I don't know where it is, but I have one in my purse. Come here. Here.
Gonna go get water.
Okay, close my door. Okay. It says the second here. It should say the fifth here. Mars in Virgo. Organizing tasks. So let's talk about Virgo for a minute. Mercury has already been in Virgo. And one of the things that's happening over the course of September is that eventually by the end of the month, well, let me not say that. By the time we get through September into the first 7 to 10 days of October, we are building towards the next stellium, which will be surrounding the new moon in Virgo. We'll have Sun, Mercury, Mars, and then of course the moon, all in Virgo. And I just like to watch and observe. What's happening with certain signs to make the proper correlation. I don't always know beforehand, but I try to catch it as soon as I can. And so for Virgo, this is what I noticed. So as Ida was churning in the Caribbean, turning into a hurricane, I was like, let me compare the charts for Hurricane Katrina when it made landfall and when and where Ida was projected to make landfall. And what I remembered from just my study of hurricane charts in general was that generally in hurricane charts, you're going to see fixed signs. Right now, a lot of that has to do with hurricane season peaks while planets are in Leo, right? But what I found is that the most powerful hurricanes, and even ones that weren't as powerful, almost always featured fixed squares. So there was Leo, but then there was Scorpio, but then there was Aquarius, or then there was Taurus. And so this year, we got three. We got Sun and Mercury in Taurus. No, Sun, Mars in Leo, The moon was in Taurus, Jupiter in Aquarius, and of course the north and south nodes in Taurus and Scorpio, because that's where we have eclipses. But Hurricane Katrina's chart was an outlier in that it did not quite have that same pattern of fixed signs. And I was trying to figure out why. And what I realized is that the tragedy of Hurricane Katrina was willful neglect of the citizens and of the infrastructure. So I noticed that in the Hurricane Katrina chart, Venus was in Virgo, North Node was in Virgo, which means there were eclipses in Virgo and Pisces. Jupiter was in Virgo, right? So for me, I'm like, okay, let's see what this is. And so now what I'm pegging on this Virgo, that we're building up this stellium. Again, Mercury's already there, though it's going to leave briefly when it stations retrograde at the 1st degree of Libra, which I mentioned earlier in this video. What I'm looking at for Virgo is infrastructure, right? Virgo is the engineer. And what has happened on the East Coast is neglect of infrastructure. So that's what I'm watching with these Virgo transits. I'm watching infrastructure. I'm watching data, right? In terms of what statistics and research are we compiling and is being published, both around COVID, around vaccines, COVID treatments, deaths, cases, of course, vaccines for children. And then I'm also just looking at infrastructure. I mean, I said this before on Twitter, and at this point, I'm really shook because part of my work is that I will say things with a lot of conviction that I don't really necessarily have material evidence for, and then things start to happen and I'm like shook. And one of the things that really has me shook is how heavy Spirit kept putting this word collapse. And in my mind, I'm just like, that's real extreme, Spirit. Like, why you got me out here talking like this? Like, this is real extreme. I don't know about this. And Spirit was like, no, we are well past the point of dismantling anything. We are at the point of collapse. Dismantle means that you have a choice to go in and assess the structure, to examine the foundation for cracks, to put in remedial measures to repair what has been broken, to salvage what remains. But we are not at dismantle anymore. We are not even at defund. You can throw money at the police. You can throw money at a lot of different things. We're past that. This is collapse. And collapse looks like you have allowed something to exist far beyond its lifespan. You have neglected something to the point that it can no longer be maintained, right? Sometimes you need to cut your losses and demolish. And I hate talking like this because when I talk like this, Spirit be talking through me and I have to go live this stuff, and I don't want to live this stuff. Like, I can't just get on here. My spiritual director is always reminding me that whatever you preach, it's a sermon for you first. And so I don't want to say these things because they're scary and I don't want to live them. But the truth of the matter is that we have let it go way too far and we don't have control or agency. And I know this culture has taught you that if you work hard enough and if you're just strategic enough and you do it the right way and you choose the right thing and you have the luck and the help and you manifest and you do your vision board and you can have it and you can do it, but ain't no way we gonna vision board and manifest ourselves out of collapse. And yes, you may have some joy and happiness and wealth and abundance in your life right now, but your turn is coming. And so if your belief system is rooted in some favor that you think protects you from the fate of humanity, from the community of people in which you live, you are sorely mistaken. If your belief system makes you think that you are going to be able to hold on to or acquire some kind of wealth that protects you from the fate, trust me, you are just delaying the inevitable. And that's fine if you want to protect your psyche from the truth of what's going on, but understand, when you are delaying the inevitable, there is still suffering going on. Just as quickly as people fix their mouths to talk about Louisiana and the Gulf Coast and New Orleans and LaFriche and LaPlace and all of these other places that were inundated with water, that storm said, bitch, I am not done with you, and it re-strengthened and said, East Coast, I got a taste for you too. So if you think you're separate from the suffering of any human in this world, you are sorely mistaken. And if your belief system requires you to project instability and lack of safety onto other people and say, well, I'm fine, I'm okay, that's never going to happen to me. I live here. My government is Democrat. We're liberal. We've done this. Trust me, we are one, honey. And I know we like to say we are one as like some woo-woo, everything is all. No, when I say we are one, whatever devastation and destruction and instability that you see is coming for you. And if you have the privilege to observe rather than to live it, count yourself lucky and take it as your time to prepare. Take it as your time to prepare. If you have the privilege to watch it on the news rather than to be inside of it, trust me, you are next. All of y'all on the East Coast, watch that storm smack the crap out of Louisiana. And then it came for you. And you had 8 minutes before your apartment was completely flooded. You were stuck on airplanes. The road filled up with water from the river, and that water still hasn't receded. Understand, oneness is a survival reality. You cannot protect yourself from anything that you weaponize against someone else, whether you weaponize it with your belief system, you weaponize it with your money, with your neglect, with your vote, with your political power, with your job, with where you choose to live. Well, I'm not going to send my kids there. Guess what? Even those of you who thought you were going to move to a wealthy neighborhood to escape the poors, guess what? You now don't even have a mask on at your school. Now you got to shut down the whole school district because you thought your wealth was going to protect you from this thing that we're all exposed to. If you fix your lips and wrap your mind to say, not me, never here, know that you're next. That's just the way that it is. One thing that globalism has done, and it has erased whatever natural borders of space and time that have existed to cordon us off from people and things, for good or ill. It's over, right? So next we have, so tomorrow, tomorrow's the 4th, right? Right, so Sunday, September 5th, we have Mars in Virgo, organizing tasks, Venus in Libra on the 5th, creating agreements, right? So when we're talking about Libra, when we're talking about creating agreements, we are talking about consensus. We are talking about, Capricorn says it is what it is. You know what's real based upon the material consequences of your encounter with it. You can call it a wall. You could call COVID a hoax. You could call it a scam. You could call it fake. You could call it a biological weapon. It could have made in a lab. It could have came from a bat. None of those names or labels really matter, because when you get that thing, you don't want it. Like once you're like, I don't care what you call it. Okay? So Capricorn this is the material consequences of your encounter with this thing, regardless of what the label is that you want to call it. And so when we get squares between Libra and Capricorn, these are important, right? Because now our language has to catch up with reality. Our consensus about what we agree something is has to be tested against the reality of what it actually is. So you can name it a hoax, and you and your little political group of people can call it a hoax, but that doesn't really matter when you're stuck with a tube down your throat, half conscious, with COVID eating away at your lungs, right? 6 months later, you die of a heart attack because COVID has destroyed your vascular system. Like, I don't care what you call it at that point. It doesn't even really matter, right? So September is such an important month because so many of the major themes that we've been dealing with are coalescing in a very, very, very major way. On Twitter, I talked about how every year in 2021, particularly if we start with August, I want to start with August because 2016 was really the turning point, right? Every year in 2021, and we're focusing on August, September, October, November, December, corresponds with a previous year. So August of 2021 corresponds with 2016. I don't think that I need to explain to you why or the technicalities of it, because if you look at what's happened in August, you can see very clearly that what has happened in August is a direct consequence of 2016. And so now when we come to September, this is 2017, October is 2018. And I'm very, very, very curious and fascinated about September and October 2021 corresponding to the years 2017 and 2018, because these were years where Libra as a sign was very front and center. We saw Me Too, we saw Time's Up, we saw all of these figures go down because of their histories of mistreatment of women, and we saw so many people who were not men being elected to office across the world, political office for the first time. And so obviously we have some more work to do, unfortunately, with that. There's a new moon in Leo. Can I just pause here for a moment and talk about like how these planets have been moving so slow in terms of their distance from each other that like Mars entered Leo, Venus entered Leo when? This was it July? Right, Mars entered Leo July 20th, Venus entered Leo July 16th. It's September and we still ain't had no new moon in Leo, y'all. And understand, like, for me, in terms of keeping time and talking about seasons, the new moons are really like tether and anchor points that help me get a sense of where we are in a particular series of transits through a sign in each year. So the fact that we've had planets in Leo since mid-July and we are in September and we still have not had the new moon, like, patriarchy is literally like, just in case you do not know who I was, what my agenda is, or what I am capable of, I am here to remind you who your enemy is. And so if there's anything that we should be taking from these past couple of months, is that I hope you recognize who and what your enemy is. All right? I'll be doing a reading for the new moon next week, God willing, but planting seeds to preserve my authority. Let's talk about it for next week. Okay? The 14th of September, Jupiter in Capricorn, facing reality offers new ways to understand. And then, of course, the fill in the blank is you should know what your Capricorn house is because you have filled out the houses in your birth chart table. And so you should know what your Capricorn house. Facing reality offers new ways to understand. Sun in Virgo on the 16th, focus on perceiving the facts. Ooh, I'm so excited about these Virgo trines with Capricorn, especially once the sun gets there, because Jupiter's about to be back in Capricorn too. Mars gonna listen. Let me tell you, these trines between Virgo and Capricorn are giving us a dose of I've counted and I've measured, and Capricorn is saying like, you see? You couldn't see before, but you see now, don't you? Back to life, back to reality. Let's see. Then we get a full moon in Pisces on the 20th of September, seeing clearly what is implied by. Ooh, that sounds juicy. Mercury in Libra on the 21st, negotiating to reach a consensus. What shall we be negotiating, my friends? And then Mercury in Libra, stationary retrograde on the 27th. Amplifying renegotiation. So apparently we need to go back and we need to figure some things out. As we move through September and into October, I want you to be thinking about what 2017 and 2018 were like for you. I want you to be thinking about, particularly I know in 2017 and 2018, a lot of us were radicalized. Now, of course, that's because Saturn was in Sagittarius. We had eclipses in Gemini and Sagittarius. And so our political consciousness was being awakened. So many of us were discovering who and what we are in terms of how the political and social and cultural climate forced us to take sides. And this idea that we could be middling or that we could be apathetic towards our own experiences or things that were going on in the world. We're like, what we're not going to do. And so we are back to that point, and I know that our fake fake roaring 20s that we experienced, right? I know that a lot of us have been lulled into thinking that we're like back to some kind of normal because the vaccines ain't wrong, and it is given us, you know, in some ways, just a reprieve from having to think about political things. But like I said, September is back to life, back to reality. Let's go back to September here. We've got some questions. Oh, Lord, I didn't even look at these questions. Okay, but I'm going to read them, okay? I hope they're not scary. Reflect on your Capricorn house. What is your Capricorn house, people? You will know. My thing, oh, here it is. I thought my thing fell out. You will know what your Capricorn house is because you filled out houses in your birth chart. These are my houses in my birth chart because I am Sagittarius rising. Sagittarius is 1. Every single sign after that is numerically in order. There are no repeats, right? So Sagittarius is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Capricorn is 2 for me, okay? And then you know what the topics of house 2 are because you went to the house meetings or whatever your Capricorn house is. And again, this is only sidereal. You see what I'm looking at, y'all? This is the 2021 sidereal astrology guide, not the tropical. So you've got to use your sidereal birth chart. Go to thepeoplesoracle.com, click sidereal birth chart. Okay. So reflect on your Capricorn house. What's the story of these topics and relationships? There are not relationships for every house, but there are topics and there are body parts, okay? So what's the story of these topics and relationships going all the way back to January 2020? Ooh, this is a retrospective, my friends. January 2020, Saturn entered Capricorn. New moon in Capricorn, January 23rd, January 24th. Within 24 hours, Wuhan shut down. Okay? So go back to January 2020. Some things have changed in your Capricorn house. What has changed? Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you have a new vision? Do you have a new idea? Have you accepted the reality of your Capricorn house? How's that going for you? Okay? What's the story? Okay? Next we have, what connections can you make? Oof, this is good. I don't want to. This is a good one. What connections can you make between this present moment in your Capricorn house and 2008, 2009? Then I ask you to describe the current state of affairs of your Libra house. Again, you will know what your Libra house is because you will go to this table and you will find Libra here. So that's 11 for me. But it may not be 11 for you. It's 11 for me because I am Sidereal Sagittarius rising. Are you Sidereal Sagittarius rising? If you are, Libra is 11 for you. If you are not Sidereal Sagittarius rising, then you need to go to thepeoplesoracle.com, click Sidereal birth chart, and and follow the instructions for casting your Sidereal birth chart using astro.com, and then find the Libra glyph, which looks like that right here. And yeah, let's see. So describe the current state of affairs of your Libra house, and then what story emerges between conversations and negotiations happening in your Libra house now and what took root in 2018, especially September through December. So to answer this question, you need to remember September through December 2018. Why is September through December 2018 relevant? One, because we are building towards a stellium in Libra that peaks the first week of November. Two, in September through December 2018, Jupiter was at the tail end of Libra, just about to hop over into Scorpio when Venus entered Libra. Venus entered Libra September, and it stayed there until January 1st, 2019. Why? Because Venus retrograded in Libra at the end of 2018. And so, what was going on for you? For some of us, we were radicalized. For some of us, we were forced to remember the violence that we've experienced at the hands of men in positions of power and authority. Some of us got involved in reproductive justice work. Some of us got involved in political activism. Some of us ran for office. Some of us decided to run for public office, political office, all of these things, right? So what was happening during that time for you? What significant relationships with women were happening for you September 2018 through December 2018, right? That's what that is. I think I've said enough. How long have I been on here? Ooh, 68 minutes. Yep, and it's getting dark. So I don't want to stay on here too long because I don't have my setup. I don't have my lights. I don't have nothing. I just got my devices. So yeah, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of things to think about. I'm not gonna lie, y'all. It has been so hard to continue to do this work under these circumstances. The level of apathy and kind of closing in on myself, I feel, is very high right now. And I love astrology. I can think about astrology all day, talk about it, but it's really, really, really hard to do anything when you try to figure out if you're going to have a home to go to. Granted, my house was not damaged. My belongings are fine, but New Orleans is not okay. It's not okay spiritually and psychologically. And it's not okay materially. You know, how many times can you rebuild on soggy land? You know? So many 100+ year old trees were uprooted in New Orleans because we got all of the country's rain, you know, in June and July. I mean, the rain was just outrageous. And so the ground was oversaturated. And already New Orleans is on a swamp. So, yeah, like the landscape. There wasn't too much structural damage in terms of like loss of buildings. I think there was really only one complete collapse of a building in New Orleans. I can't speak for people's homes. Definitely lots of trees falling and roofs peeling back and broken windows. But, you know, I don't know, man. I don't know. I know these next few months from now to next May are going to be challenging for me personally. And I know that there's going to be a lot of changes. I just don't see myself staying in New Orleans. Spirit hasn't told me where I'm going, who I'm going with. It might be back here. You know, there are some things in my family that might need my attention and my presence. I don't know. But yeah. Yeah, man. I'm all right. All I need for y'all is to continue to watch my videos and follow me on social media so I can at least maintain my livelihood while my life is changing and in upheaval. And to continue to spread the good word that edifies you, that liberates you, you know. Continue to share it, because I do this because it's meaningful to me, and from your feedback, it's helpful and liberating for y'all. So, yeah, man. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate you thinking of me. And every single time you see somebody's Cash App, Venmo, or GoFundMe come down the timeline, I want you to remember that survival is meant to be a shared burden, not an individual obligation. People live where they live because that is where their home is, and that is where their family is. And when you are asking people to leave their home, you are asking them to leave the land that they are rooted and connected to. You are asking them to leave their ancestors behind. You are asking them to leave their home and property. You are asking them to leave their family members behind. Eventually, we will migrate. We will migrate from the coast of California, the West Coast. We will migrate from the South, from the Gulf Coast. We will migrate from the East Coast, because we have made those places uninhabitable. And it's going to happen much sooner. COVID expedited that process. But understand that people don't leave for the same reason that, do you have the money to leave? Where are you going? You got the money? Where are you going to go? You're going to go somewhere where you don't have any family? We have to start all over? You're going to leave behind your culture, your language, your cuisine, your God, your spirituality, all of that stuff? Unfortunately, we're all going to have to go. There's very few of us who will not have to move. Very few of us. And so when I talk about survival being a shared burden and not an individual obligation, I'm talking about recognizing that stability and security and safety is found in relationship. And whatever semblance of security or stability you have been believing that exists because of your material circumstances, some stroke of luck or privilege, understand that without connections to other people, your stability is precarious and in danger. Take note from Louisiana and New Orleans. They know how to share the burden of survival out of necessity. The rest of us have been living under the illusion of safety and wealth and a stable climate that makes us think that we can continue this lifestyle without deep connections with other people. But when I moved to New Orleans, my neighbors, they look out. All my neighbors called my phone. They called my phone. They said, Dana, are you okay? Did you and Saru get out? Do you need a ride? They know how to share the burden of survival. They're down there sharing the burden of survival right now. But them folks on the East Coast, they think their money in their gilded tower is going to protect them. They don't even know their neighbors. Do you know your neighbors? When a threat comes that threatens you all, you better know your neighbors. And if you don't know your neighbors, I pray that you can be rooted and grounded in a place where you do know your neighbors. You can survive for a very short time in isolation out of necessity. But the threats that we confront right now require community, and they require the sharing of the burden of survival. And I know so many, if not all of us, especially those who gravitate to this work, have deep wounds and have been harmed in community that has led to deep distrust, alienation that has forced you into isolation, that has forced you into erasing yourself into oblivion and an invisibility. I get that, but understand that we must share the burden of survival, not just on the internet, but in person. It's the only way. And I know it feels hard and it feels impossible to be asked that. But understand that if you have not built relationship and community with those who are in close proximity to you, it is because your privilege has protected you from having to do so. And your privilege that has protected you from having to build in-person relationships with the people around you will not protect you for much longer. That's all I have to say. It's dark. Y'all can barely see me, but I made it. I will talk to y'all. See y'all. Thank you.